Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I just want to go through some housekeeping rules. Everyone on the webinar today will be on mute, but if you've got any questions, please post them into the Q&A box that you'll see opened up on the left-hand side, and we do have some time at the end to answer your questions. We've also made some resources available for you to download, but you'll be able to access them from the green resource folder. And the webinar will also be recorded, so you'll be able to watch this afterwards and share with your colleagues. There will be a demonstration today, so if you'd like to maximise the slide area, you can do this by clicking the green circle, or you can drag and drop from the bottom right-hand corner. So what I'd now like to do is hand you over to Tim Payne, who's a Senior Architect at Qlik, and he'll be taking you through today's presentation. So thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this Qlik Sense Tips and Tricks webinar. My name is Tim Payne, and I'm a Senior Solution Architect here at Qlik. There will be some time for questions and answers at the end of this session, so please make use of the Q&A chat panel throughout this webinar, and we'll pick up some questions and answers at the end of the session. So, without further ado, let's get started. Let's just take a few moments to look at the product edition Qlik Sense comes in. First up is Qlik Sense Desktop. This is a freely available product downloadable from our website. This allows users to create apps locally from multiple different data sources and then share those findings back using Qlik's data storytelling. Next up, we have Qlik Sense Cloud. This allows users to upload the applications that they've created in desktop and share those applications with other people. It also allows uploading of file-based data to Qlik Sense Cloud, and we can actually create applications directly in the cloud using that file-based data. This is all for free. If we want to have more data or more people that we want to share with, then there is the Plus model, which is a subscription-based model. The next level up is the Qlik Sense Enterprise edition, which is a fully licensed edition of Qlik Sense. This allows online creation and analysis capability with collaboration, security, management, governance, and mobile readiness. First up, we're going to look at some troubleshooting techniques, how we can use Qlik Sense in slightly different ways and using the navigation in ways that you may not be aware of. We're then going to look at some file-based data access methods. We're going to look at extension objects and introduce Qlik Branch, which is our developer network. I'm going to talk a little bit on data governance and the master items library, as well as introducing variables. Finally, we're going to take a look at some more advanced Qlik scripting, ways to transform the data as we load it into Qlik. I appreciate on webinars that we have a wide audience, so if we don't cover something specific for your needs, I will show you at the end where we can go to get more information and how you can engage with Qlik to get those answers. So, that stated, let's get started. Built up within Qlik Sense is an integrated data source that we can use without the need to go to any external data sets. We don't need to connect to a database. We don't need an Excel file. What we can do is get Qlik Sense to automatically generate some data that we can play with. So why is this important? Well, it actually gives us a very quick way to load multiple different data types that we can start to play around with to actually test our expressions, test our measures, and test our dimensions in a really easy, quick environment. Let me show you what I mean by this and show you how to get to the sample data. As I do that, I'm actually going to be calling out a few navigational tips and tricks that I use when I'm developing applications that really help me get the most out of Qlik Sense. So I've created a new application, and the way to generate this sample data is to use the Data Load Editor. So we're going to click on the Data Load Editor and bring up a familiar looking script that I'm sure we're all aware of. If I place the cursor underneath here, all I have to do to generate this script is press and hold the Control button and tap the 0 key twice. Control 0 0. This then generates some script, and this will actually create 3 tables of data right there automatically within Qlik. We've not created a new data connection at all. This is all built in. If I click Load Data now, you'll see that the data has been generated, and I've got 3 tables with about 2,000 records. So what does this data actually look like? So this is where one of my navigation tips is going to come in. If we click the navigation button here, we could go directly to the app overview or the data model viewer, and this will replace what we've got on screen. If we actually move over and we click the right button here, what this does is actually opens in a new tab. Now what this actually allows us to do is look at the tables we've got, the transaction tables. We can see all of the fields that are in here, and we can click on the preview button and look at the data that's behind that. But we can easily jump back to the script. We can carry on opening new tabs for that same application. So if we want to look at the app overview, we can again open this in a new tab. So if I come and create a new sheet and go into the application and go to edit mode, you can see here all of the fields that we have and available for us to use. So we might want to create a bar chart, simply drag it on, add a dimension and add a measure. Let's pick the number and let's do a sum of the number, and we've got a straightforward bar chart. So by using this sample data, what we can do is we can actually test out any particular things that we might want to. A complicated expression that we can use, just a really simple application to test this out. Now because I have these tabs open, it also means that I can jump back to the script and the load button is already there. So if we're running through a development process where we're creating some data and we need to reload the data, and we're creating a bar chart and we need to reload the data, rather than having to jump back through the navigation menu and open up each of the tabs individually, we can have these tabs side by side so that we can get backwards and forwards easily. Certainly when I'm developing applications, I will always have the data load editor on one side of my desktop, and on the other side I will have the application. It just gives easy, quick access to jump backwards and forwards between the various different components within the same application. It's something not everyone's aware of, so it's worth calling out now. Built directly into Qlik Sense's script editor is a debug mode. Using the debug mode, we can actually create breakpoints to trap the execution of the script as it loads, to inspect some temporary variables or temporary tables that may exist within our script. It also allows us to do what's called a limited load. That is to say, when we reload the data, we don't need to reload every single record. We can just limit that at a certain amount. That's really handy if you're dealing with very large volumes of data, but actually creating the data model, we only need a few hundred records to actually check that the model works. So by using the limited load, it means we can really speed up those reloads. So let's have a look at the debug mode, how we access it and how we can use it. So this is an application that contains some sales data, and we're going to have a look at the debugger within this application. So the first thing you'll notice is there's no script after these default set statements. And that's because what I've done is used the sections of the script on the left hand side. Using sections of the script, it means we can actually break down the script and we don't need to have one extremely long script. So for the product information, this contains the product information and the category information, and these both come from one Excel spreadsheet. In the next segment, we have all of the data that's concerned with the SQL data, and the final segment is about the KML and the mapping data. So by breaking these sections down, it means that if we do have problems, we can just jump to one particular section, and we know that all of the data around the SQL database that's being loaded is in this section, and this is really where to start looking and focusing in on the problem. So first thing I'm going to do is load all of the data. And as it goes through, you can see the script is executing, and we can see that there's quite a few records in here. I'm going to use the same technique as I showed you previously and jump to that data model viewer. We can now see the associations between all of the different tables, and if I look at the order table and have a preview, you'll notice that 836 rows were brought into Qlik's data model. Now if this was a live system, this order table could be huge. It could be several hundred thousands of records. But actually when we're creating the associations and making sure that the data model works, we probably only need to bring in a couple of hundred to really make sure that the model works. So how do we do this? This is where the debugger and the limited load comes in. So if I jump back to the data load editor, we can access the debug menu by this little bug at the top next to load data, and if we click this we get the panel beneath. What we can do here is tick on limited load. By default this is 100 records, and that's what we're going to use, but we can change this to any value we want. And we can simply press the play button. What this will do will then execute the script, but at each load statement will only load the first 100 records. So that script is now executed. We can turn off the debug mode, and if we jump back to our data model viewer and we look at the order details, we can now see we've only loaded 100. If I look at the order details table, again there's just 100. In the tables where there were fewer than 100 to start with, it's loaded them all, so there's 77 in the products table. So that's just one really good way of just doing that limited load to be able to just load a subset of that data to really speed up the development process. If we look back again here, we may want to see what our variables look like, and we can set breakpoints to check these. I've got no variables in the script myself, but if we just set one here, you can see an example. If I click the little bug mode here, bring up the debugger mode, you can see the breakpoints where we could stop and trap the date. I'll turn off the limited load so we can load the full data set again, and I'll press the play button. And it executes through until it hits one of our breakpoints. And there what we can do is, using this variables window here on the left hand side, inspect to see what our variables look like. So my date format, for example, is DD, MM, YY, YY. So it gives us a really easy way of being able to see the values of variables as the script executes. If we want to stop the debug mode, we can just press the stop button and it will take us back and jump us back out. There's another advantage of actually putting the script in different sections, and that's we can actually check to see that what's been loaded in one section actually works together. So if we just take a look at our product information and we want to make sure that these two tables are associating correctly, but we don't really at this stage need to worry about our SQL data and our KMLs, what we can use is a handy command called exit script. And what this does is jumps out of the script execution and just loads in what it's loaded at that particular time. So this is the first section, and this is just loading the categories and the products, and it's not looking at any of those order transaction details or looking at the KMLs for mappings. So if we just save this and load this data now, and we then jump back to the data model viewer, you'll see that it's just loaded those two tables. Now that's a really easy way of just building up the data model without having to worry about loading the whole script the entire time. It just makes that debugging and that app development cycle that much easier and that much quicker. So let's get rid of the exit script. Now something else that I want to show you from the script editor window is the ability to jump directly to the online help. So let's say that our product names, we've been requested that we have a short name for our product name, which is just the first five characters of that product. So we can start to create a new dimension based on a field we already have. So there's a function called left, and I'm going to call product left with product name. And straight away we can see that we've got a little bit of help here, saying it takes the text expression and a count expression. Well, we've been asked to generate the first 5 characters of that count expression. So we can put in 5 there as short name. But then thinking about it, some development programming languages start counting at 0 and some count at 1. So how can we be sure that our (5) in this instance is actually counting from 1 and not 0? Well, we can hit the question mark button at the top here to turn on help mode. And every single function of Qlik, which we can then jump from, is underlined and put in blue. So if we click on that left function there, it takes us directly through to Qlik's online help. We can now have a look at this online help, see exactly what this function's all about, see exactly what we mean by the left function, and say, yep, that's great. So if we've been given a script by somebody else and it's using functions that we aren't aware of and we don't know how they operate, so it makes that debugging process that much harder, we can use the help built directly in Qlik Sense script editor to jump to the relevant sections within the help. We all know that by using HTML5 technologies that Qlik Sense is built on responsive designs right from the offset. That means that we can design it on one device and it will automatically flex to the real estate given when we consume on any other device. But how do we go about testing that? Now, the first way is by using Qlik Sense Enterprise Edition, which allows us to connect multiple devices to the server. Out of the box, we can have 5 sessions logged in under the same user, and because they're shared on that same user, they share the same state. And that means that all selections we make when logged in reflect on all of those other devices. So let me show you what I mean by this. So this is an application I have running on my server. And what I'm going to do is also log in using my same login credentials on an iPad as well. And if I just jump to my iPad screen here, you can see that that same application is replicated on my iPad. So I'm logged into the same application, I'm logged in as the same user, so now when I select on my application, everything is being updated on my iPad exactly at the same time as I do it. The sessions are linked together. So what this means is actually, whilst I'm making selections, I can view things in real time how they would appear to a user using an iPad. We can take this one step further, and I can actually go and edit this. So I'm editing the underlying application. I may want to make this bar chart a bit smaller, and it automatically becomes smaller in the iPad. So I can create my designs and see exactly on the fly what they look like to that end user using the iPad view. Similarly, whilst I'm in edit mode on the desktop, I can actually make some selections from the iPad that's not in edit mode, and I can flex what's going on in the background. As I mentioned, with Qlik Sense Enterprise, the default is to allow the same user 5 sessions, so they can log in with 5 different devices and they will all share that same experience and all share the same selection criteria. The other use case that I've seen for this is actually someone presenting a dashboard, and they've actually then used their iPhone to make selections whilst they're talking about the dashboard. So completely remotely using an iPhone to drive that presentation. So what if we don't have an iPhone or an iPad or any other device to test out this responsive design? Is there any way that we can actually see what it would look like on other devices without needing another device? And the answer to that is yes. So let's jump back to the application, and I'm just going to click Done and clear my selections. Now I'm using a Chrome web browser, and like all modern web browsers, it contains something called Developer Tools. And this is for web developers to really see what's going on behind the code. But actually built into these tools are ways to emulate other devices. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to come to Chrome toolbar, more tools, and select developer tools. And it pops me up a different menu on the left hand side. Now I'm not going to go into all the technical things behind this, but on the top here is a button called Toggle Device Mode. And if we select that, you'll see straight away that it puts it in a mobile phone view. And this is representing what it would look like on a Nexus 5X. And it gives us a sample as to what that resolution of that screen is. We could also have a look what it might look like on an iPad, for example. So there it is on our iPad in portrait mode. And we could turn it round, and let's see what it looks like on the iPad when we're in landscape mode. So by using the built-in browser functions, we can actually see Qlik Sense's responsive design and how it would look on other devices. Can we do this with the desktop version as well? Because you cannot connect other devices to the desktop. Well, actually the answer here is still yes. Although you can't connect other devices to the desktop version, you can view the desktop version directly through a web browser. If I look at my other tab here, this is actually still within my Chrome browser, but I'm actually looking at my Qlik Sense desktop. And the way we do that is to just point the browser to localhost on port 4848, and we can then get a feel of what's going on the desktop mode as well. So we can go into any of these applications, and it's the desktop environment but using within that Chrome browser experience. And what that means is that also gives us access to the developer tools that we have. So we can come into one of these applications and again go to more tools and developer tools, and let's see what it looks like on the iPad. One question that comes up regularly in the forums online are, can Qlik Sense consume online cloud storage files? I'm going to show you a couple of ways of doing this with both Google Drive and Dropbox, which are two of the largest places that we get requests from. Let me jump into a new application and show you how this is done. So first up, let's look at Dropbox. Now I've got Dropbox installed on my machine, which gives my file browser within Windows access to my Dropbox folders. And I've navigated my way into the Getting Started data, and this contains some data that I'm going to look at, in particular this categories XLSX file. If we right click on this categories XLS file, you'll notice that there is a link, Copy Dropbox Link. And what this does is puts into my clipboard the link that goes directly to this file. So now if I jump into my application, I can create a new connection, and I'm going to create a web file connection. And I can paste that URL into that URL statement there. Now one thing to note is that this Dropbox link contains a query in that HTML string saying DL equals 0. In order for this method to work, we just need to change that to DL equals 1. What this enables Qlik Sense to do is then to download a copy of the categories XLSX file in memory, parse it, and use it just like it was an Excel file on our own machine. So if we give this a name, Dropbox cats, and we create this data connection, we can then go and look at this data connection just as we would any other Excel file. But rather than it pulling it from my desktop, it's actually pulling it directly from this data source in Dropbox within the cloud. And there is the data as it appears, and we can insert that script and load that away. So I've just switched over to my browser now, and I've logged into a Google account and created this Google Sheet. And this is an example sheet of our employees. How do we get this into Qlik Sense? Well, what we can do here is go to File and publish to the web. And what we can do is just click the Publish button. Are you sure we wish to publish this selection? OK. And this creates a URL link that we can now use within Qlik Sense. Now it's worth pointing out in both this example and the Dropbox example, we're only talking about publicly accessible URLs here. So there's no authentication, no logins. So the data that Qlik Sense is ingesting is publicly available to anybody with these particular links. We just go to copy this URL and we jump back to our Qlik Sense application. We can now create a new connection, and again it's a web file connector. We can simply paste that into that, Google Drive, and that's the employees table there, and we can create this. And again, if we just jump in to pick that data, you'll see that that data gets pulled through in exactly the same way as any other spreadsheet. For the next part of the webinar, I'm going to speak to you about extension objects. Now, any real data visualization platform will offer a way to extend the capabilities that are offered by default. And at Qlik, we do that via our APIs. We have several different APIs, from our Mashup API and Visualization APIs, and they're all built on open and standard technologies, such as JavaScript, HTML5, and CSS3, etc. And this means that existing web development skills can be harnessed to create not only new visualizations, but also new interactivity with the application. And this can really enhance applications for your end users, or you can use it to create something very specific for a very unique use case. I'm going to run you through a couple of demo applications that contain extension objects, and then show you a bit about Branch, which is our open source developer network, and how we can look at extension objects and use them within your own applications. So the first application I'm going to show, which contains extension objects, is the Retail Margin Erosion application. Now, I've chosen this application because it's hosted live on our Qlik Sense demo website, which means after the webinar you can jump onto our website and take a look at this application yourself. Now, I'm not going to get into too many details about this, but it's all about how overstocking of products leads to markdown in price of those products. And we're going to look at extension objects that lets us look at what-if analysis. So if I launch the demo and I go to the final page, what we can see is various different products with some slider objects. Now, these slider objects are extension objects. So if, for example, we looked at the poultry markdown and we decrease the markdown to 96%, you can actually see we're making a saving of £24,000. So by playing with these sliders, looking at various different categories, we can actually do some what-if analysis and see how much we're saving. There's a great story behind this, which I suggest you go and look at after the webinar as well. So that's just one example of an interaction that has been developed as an extension object. The next extension objects I'm just going to show you briefly are the Reload button and the word cloud. Now, this is an application that I built very simply to get weather forecasting information for all of the places that we have offices. And the word cloud simply allows us to visualize the overriding weather summary. And as you can see, it looks like it's going to be pretty rainy for the entire of our Qlik organization over the next 7 days. If we press the reload button, what we can actually do is, providing we have the relevant security, is actually reload this data from the front end without necessarily needing to go back to the data load editor to trigger that reload. That can all be done at the front. And again, this is another web extension. So what I'm going to do now is show you where to find some of these extension objects and how to bring them into your applications. I've mentioned it before, but Qlik Branch is our web developer and development website where all of our information is shared and where all of the developers come together as a community and help each other develop, move forward and share ideas. Everything on Qlik Branch is open source, which means you can all look at it, all view it, and your web developers can take a project that exists on Qlik Branch and develop it further and continue with that development. And the address of that is simply branch.qlik.com. So if we click on projects, we can see what projects are available to us. And just like any good Qlik Sense application, we have a search term here. So I'm going to show you how to bring in the word cloud object to Qlik Sense desktop. So if I simply type in Word, it brings back all the projects that contain Word, and we're looking for the word cloud for Sense. So if I click into this project, you'll see this is an example of what the end project would look like, as well as comments about how the application has been developed, with other people sharing ideas with different methodologies to fix any issues that may arise from this. At the top of this is a link here to the relevant GitHub location. So if we just jump to this GitHub location, this is where we can actually download that source code. And if we just come down to download the zip, I'm just going to save the link as, and place that in my extensions folder of Qlik Sense. Now this is talking about importing extensions into the desktop version, and this can be found in your documents, Qlik Sense extensions. And I'm just going to save that away in that extensions folder. So if I now look at this particular folder, we now have this zip file in here, in the extensions folder. What we need to do is extract it. So I'll extract the zip file here. We can now get rid of this zip folder because Qlik Sense Desktop uses these extension objects in a non-zipped format. So if I go to my Qlik Sense Desktop, we'll go back to our country sales dashboard, and if I jump to my extension sheet here and click Edit, you'll notice that Word Cloud now appears as an object to use. So this is a brand new visualization object that we can now incorporate into our application. And you'll notice that an extension object appears in the list of chart objects just as the default chart objects appear, which means when we give these to our end user to develop with, they don't need to learn anything new. Everything is exactly the same look and feel, which means that it's very easy for them to get up and running with these extensions. So if I just drag the word cloud in here, and we add the dimension of country, and add the measure of total customers, we straight away see our word cloud formed. And we can see that the USA is much bigger text than everyone else, so they have the most customers. On the right hand side as well, we have the properties panel, just as you would expect for every other object within Qlik Sense. Only this time, because it's an extension object, we can start to change things like the orientations and the angles of these word clouds, right down to the scale color that we've got here. So we can really start to give the user that same look and feel experience and easily embed extension objects. So I would certainly check out Qlik Branch, see what's being developed there. Also speak with any web developers in your organization as well, because the APIs that we offer will mean that the web developers can pick up this extension philosophy and get up and running, creating you new visualizations and interactivity that you never really thought about before now. So for this part of the Tips and Tricks webinar, I'm going to look at the master items list and also variables. Sometimes this gets overlooked by developers as they're creating their analysis, and what they end up doing is creating the same process of charts, the same properties over and over again, when actually we could use a master visualization to start that process and speed things up. Finally, we're going to take a look at variables and how we can define variables within the application to really govern and make reusable assets to be used within other expressions and other objects. So let's start and build up a visualization, and let me show you what I mean by the master visualization library. So we're just going to create a bar chart with sales and country, and we've got a simple bar chart there, as we all know how to do. I'm going to make some changes to this chart, add some more properties in the right hand side menu, just to flesh out this chart, to sort of show you the example of the visualization library a little bit better. So first off, I'm going to add some alternative dimensions. Let's add city to this, and let's add profit as well. We'll give this a title, sales by geography. And let's change the way this looks as well. Maybe change it to horizontal, add some values on those, and let's colour by the measure. So there we've got a chart, and we've added a few properties to us. So if we wanted to recreate this chart, we'd have to go through that exact same process over and over and over again. And the more properties and the more custom properties you set, obviously would be redoing the work again and again and again. So this is where we can use our visualization master library to really speed up that process. So we can simply drag and drop that into the master visualization library. One of the properties I just set there about alternative dimensions and measures is perhaps worth flagging up now as well, because this was a recent introduction in version 2.2 of the software. If we look at our visual exploration menu, what we can see now is we can actually cycle through the country or city, and maybe rather than the sales we might want to look at the profit instead. So this just gives the end user a way of customizing the experience even if they don't have edit rights within this particular chart or this particular sheet. And we can just simply apply or discard those when we go back. Now we've got our chart, it's linked to the visualization, and that's great. So it means that if in the future we come back to this and we want to use this on multiple sheets, or somebody else would like to have a really quick way of looking at sales by geography, the visualization is stored in the library as well. So they can just drag and drop that out and they can use that however they want to. And it's a really good point now. They can just unlink the chart from the top and we get access to all of the properties that have already been set. So a really quick way of speeding up that development process. So let's just change the city as the main dimension, and we'll just rechange the sorting as well. So we've now got sales by city. So maybe we want to change the appearance of this into a slightly different colour. So we're going to use a colour by expression. So if we go into the function editor, now I'm just going to copy and paste quite a complicated expression here. Doesn't really matter what this expression is doing. I'm not going to go into the nuts and bolts of this, but effectively what this is now doing is giving it a gradient from blue to white rather than the standard default of Qlik Sense. But it's quite a complicated expression, so if we wanted to sort of brand all of our charts using the blue and white colour scheme rather than the orange colour scheme that Qlik is by default, then it would mean that we'd have to copy and paste this expression over and over again, or we would have to, perhaps rewrite it from scratch. And neither of those options are a particularly elegant way of doing it. And this is where variables come in, and they can really help become a reusable asset, just as the library items can be. So down in the bottom left-hand side of the corner here, we've got the variable window, and we can launch that up. And we can see which variables have already been created. We can see we've got a couple of date variables here. Now I'm just going to create a new variable, and I'm just going to call this V my color. And the definition is the definition we had before. So we've defined that variable, and that's great, and we've saved that away. So how do we use that variable now we've actually defined it? So if we go back to this expression, rather than pulling in this expression here, we can get hold of variables by typing $bracket, and then we can start typing in our expression name, which is V my color. Choose V my color, close the parentheses, and that is how we reference that variable. So a $sign and the brackets with the variable name inside. And what Qlik will then do is translate what's held within that variable into that expression, and we have that same expression now. But using this variable means that if we wanted to colour lots of different charts, referencing it in one place is so much easier. So for example, if we wanted to create a copy of this chart, let's just create a another chart here and unlink this one. And again, we might want to just change this slightly by using the colour by expression. So rather than having to type in that whole expression, all we need to do is V my colour, and it changes to the colours that we've already got. Now that's great, because it means that from one place we can just go into here and edit this, and rather than blue we might want to go for a red colour scheme. And we can save that away, and everything behind that flexes using our new red colour scheme. So that's how we can use variables as a reusable asset to really help speed up that process, make sure that we're not making mistakes, and really get the maximum out of Qlik Sense by using these variables. So for the final part of today's webinar, I'm going to talk briefly about the power of Qlik scripting. And I'm going to show you a couple of functions as well as a method to bring data in and transform that data to make it easier to analyse within Qlik. So we're going to look at the class function, touch on set analysis, and show you an example of cross-table data being imported. So first off, we're going to look at the class function. So to start with, let's create a simple bar chart. Total orders by country. And this is a representation of the number of orders per country, as we'd expect. But what if we want to ask the question, how many individual orders have sales between a certain range? Or what range of sales did the majority of my orders fall into? What we're after is a distribution of those sales based on the sales value. So we can use the class function to create a calculated dimension. If we go into the dimension editor, we can type class, and it gives us the information we need. So first off, we need the expression. So this is the sales, and it's then asking us for the width of this expression. Well, in this example, let's choose a range of 100. So we'll group our sales between £0 and £100, £100 and £200, and so on and so forth. We can apply that, give this a name of sales grouping, and add that dimension to our master item list. So let's take a copy of this chart and stick it down underneath, and we're going to drag on the sales grouping and replace the country. And now we can see the various different groupings and how many there were. So automatically it sorted this by the total orders, so we're just going to tweak the sorting slightly and bring the sales grouping up to the top. And we don't want it to sort by automatically, and we'll sort ascending. So now we can start to have a good feel of our distribution. We can see that actually the majority of our sales are between that £100 and £200 category. Furthermore, we might want to actually divide this into the country as well. So we can add the country, and rather than grouping them, let's stack them on top, so we've still got that visual representation of the entire of that distribution. So here we can see that a lot of countries, due to a lot of colours, are selling in all of these categories as well. And let's just convince ourselves, and let's just check the maths on this. So let's grab a table and let's add country. And let's add another column, and this time let's add the raw sales figures. No aggregation going on here. So let's just pick one at random, the £2,000 to £2,100 sale. And we can see that only 5 countries have sold in this price grouping. And if we just hover over this blue bar, that's France with 3 sales. And if we look at the table at the top here as well, that's France with 3 sales there. So we've confirmed that everything's going according to plan, and what we are showing is correct figures. So by using the class function, it's a really nice, simple way of grouping those categories together via a calculated dimension so we can see the distribution within the data. So the next topic I'd like to cover is set analysis. Now, I could do an entire hour's webinar on set analysis, so this is very much the tip of the iceberg. But I just want to give you an example of the power that it can bring to your applications. So first off, I'm going to create 3 KPI objects, and we're going to be looking at the profit of different years. So the first one is profit, and I'm just going to unlink this visualization so I can change the name of this. All-time profit. I'm just going to copy this and paste it underneath and create another KPI object, and this is going to be a year-to-date profit. Finally, I'm just going to add another one and just call that one profit. I'm also going to add the dimension of year just so that we have a selection so we can see what's going on. So all three of these are calculated at the same expression at the moment. So if we were to pick 2013, everything would flex to show the profit for 2013. If we select 2014 as well, everything is flexing to show 2013 and 2014. But we might want the KPI object to always show the all-time profit, have no relevance to the selection, and always make sure that that all-time profit figure is there in the corner. We also might want to have a year-to-date profit, just those things that have happened in 2016. We can use set analysis to do exactly that by limiting the data that various chart options can actually have access to. So let's dive in and go to the all-time profit. What we can do here is go into the sum and go to the edit the expression. Now I'm just going to bring on the magnifier so you can actually see a little bit more what I'm doing as I'm typing this. So the way that set analysis works is it creates a set expression, and the yellow bar that pops up whenever you type an expression always has the first part set expression, and this is where we create our set. And the set is encompassed by curly braces. So let's add those curly braces. Now the simplest form of set analysis is to type 1. And what 1 represents is the entire data set. So I'm just going to close the magnifier down, click apply, and now when we look at this all-time profit, it doesn't matter what we select, the all-time profit is always showing us that profit, the sum of all profit, and it's not flexing. It's always looking at all of the data, and that's what that 1 represents. So let's get a little bit more complicated, and let's look at just a year-to-date profit, just 2016's profit figures. So this time we'll go to this KPI object, and again we'll dive into the set expression, and again I'll just bring on the magnifier so that you can see a little bit more clearer what I'm doing. So again, let's put in those curly braces that we know that we need. Now this time we're not looking at the whole of the data set, but we're looking at a selection of the data. And that's represented by the dollar symbol. But we don't just want the selection that we've picked. We want to give this expression a selection. And we want to give this expression a year value of 2016. So we do this by putting a modifier in the set expression. And that modifier syntax is the angle brackets. And what we're saying in this modifier is the field year we want to equal 2016. So we just follow the syntax there. 2016 is a value, it's a text value, so we're putting that in single quotes. And we're just encompassing that in another set of curly braces because we may want to extend this out. We may want ultimately to build a set analysis statement with 2016 and 2014, for example. So we can start to build up really complicated set analysis here. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we're just going to keep this as the year 2016. So again, if I just kill off the magnifier, click apply, and click done, what you'll now see is that year-to-date profit is 37,000. And we can just check that by clicking 2016, and the one at the bottom, which is the one that flexes all the time to our selections, is showing that's 37,000. So our year-to-date profit is 37,000, as is correct. Our all-time profit hasn't changed, but we still have that third metric of profit, which is based solely on what we're selecting on the bottom. So that's a really simple example of set analysis. And set analysis is a very large topic, but it's important to understand that it's quite simple to do and it's very, very powerful. So the last thing I'm going to talk to you about today is the cross-table load. What I'm showing on screen at the moment is a fairly typical Excel report. We have country information on the left-hand side and categories on the top with sales figures in the middle. In this case it's EMEA countries with apples, oranges and pears sales data. Now ideally when we bring this into Qlik, we'd like to rotate this and uncross-table this by putting a row for every single one and calling the apples, oranges and pears items. So how do we go about doing this within Qlik scripting? I've got an application set up here and I'm going to add some data first and foremost. And I'm going to load this Excel file. I will go to my directory and load in the fruit sales Excel file. Straight away we can see that we don't need this EMEA fruit sales, it's a header. So we can increase the header size here and bring our column names in line. So now we've done that, let's just load and finish this. So now rather than going to edit the sheet, I'm actually going to go into the data load editor. And this now gives me the option to edit the script that has been automatically generated. So the auto-generated script is here, and I can simply unlock it over here so that I can have access to the actual data script itself. So in order to do a cross-table load, we simply type in cross-table. And the cross-table takes 3 parameters. The first parameter is what we're going to call the columns of the items. So these are going to be the apples, oranges and pears. And we're going to call this items. The second parameter is what we're going to call the data, what we're going to call the bulk of that sales data. And sales is an obvious choice here. And the third parameter is how many key fields this cross table takes. So we're going to be using the country and the order date. They're going to be the static fields, and we're then going to have a line for apples, a line for oranges, a line for pears underneath the items category. However, before we do this, because this is coming from the EMEA table, let's actually put in an EMEA value as well and call that region. So now we have 3 key fields. So I can type 3 there. Let me flick back to the Excel file, and I've coloured this to show you what I'm talking about. So the key fields are going to be EMEA, country and order date, and these are represented in blue. Our items are the titles that we're going to loop around by, which are the apples, oranges and pears here in the red colour. And the sales represents the bulk of the data, which is in the green here. Now the last thing, we have a totals column at the bottom, which isn't uncommon for an Excel file like this. But obviously we don't want to bring this into Qlik. So we can just use a where clause at the bottom. Where country, that's the title of the field, doesn't equal total. So there we have it. We've got our cross-table load. And now if we load this data in, this is going to be in a much better format for Qlik to understand. So let's take a quick look at the data model viewer and see the table structure. Here is our EMEA table, and if we go to preview, you can now see we've got a region field, a country field, the order date field, our new items field, which are apples, oranges and pears, and our sales figures for each of those items. So that means that when we can go to the app overview now and just make sure that everything is correct and what we expect. So I'm just going to bring on a table, and I'm going to add the dimension of items, and I'm going to bring on a measure, and that's going to be sales, and let's do the sum of sales. And let's bring on a filter pane as well, and we're just going to bring on the items filter here as well. So now when we select apples, for example, we can see our sum total is 19,939. And if we go back to our Excel file, let's just check that the apples figure there is 19,939. So this is a great way of bringing in Excel reports into Qlik. And it's really important to stress that it's a much better way to do the manipulation in Qlik than it is to manually do it in Excel. This way, next month when the next report comes in and we want to ingest February's report into Qlik, we can do that without having to spend time manipulating the Excel file manually. So as I mentioned at the start, we may not have covered something specific for your needs, but there are a whole wealth of resources that we can use and direct you to. First and foremost, there's the Qlik community forums. We have a community YouTube videos as well, with lots of videos about getting started. We can't look over the help documentation as well, which I've shown how to get to. There's Qlik Branch to help with the development and the developer side of things. And finally, there's Qlik Continuous Classroom, which is an initiative by our education team to lead the way in self-service education. Just going to take you through a quick whistle-stop tour of these. So this is Qlik Community, community.qlik.com. This is where we'll find all of the latest videos. The latest video here being the AgriChart function. I suggest you check that out. It's a great function and a great tip to use. And these are all the recent discussions. Let's also dive in and have a quick look at Qlik Continuous Classroom. There's some free content and also subscription-based content to get more formal learning. And if we just look at the master list of content and look at the data architect, we can see a whole wealth of modules that will start to build up our expertise. It's worth just pointing out a quote from Gartner's latest report, and that says, "With a modern BI architecture, power users may become the predominant content developers instead of IT developers. And in this regard, user enablement is more important, as users need just-in-time training, online tutorials, and community-based resources to support them. With Qlik Continuous Classroom and the online community forums, our whole infrastructure is there to support you get more out of Qlik." So it just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening to the webinar. I hope it's been helpful, and we've now got some time for some questions and answers.
I hope it's been helpful, and we've now got some time for some questions and answers.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. So as we mentioned, we will have a Q&A session. We do have a couple of minutes left. So if you have any questions, please post them into the Q&A box. We actually have had some questions come in already, so thank you for that. So while you are posting your questions, just wanted to highlight a great event that's coming to a town near you, and it's the Qlik Sense tour. Some of you may have attended some of the events last year, so we've got some events happening over the next couple of months. Now, for more information and locations, you can find a link in the resource folder, and that will guide you to all the locations near you. Now, these events have some great presentations from some of our customers showing how they are using Qlik for all their visual analytic needs. So, we do have a couple of minutes, so let's go and answer some questions. So, Tim, first
Hi,
one,
thanks,
is it possible? Hi. So, is it possible to use alternative states as it works in QlikView?
So that's a really good question, actually. So the Qlik engine, which obviously underpins both of the products, is still there. So the functionality to use alternative states from the engine perspective is still there. However, in the front end of Qlik Sense, currently there is actually no way to use alternate states like there is in QlikView. However, you can certainly use the alternate states by leveraging extension objects and coding that with the APIs we offer. I do believe that that will be coming in the roadmap to be able to do the front end alternative states in a similar view.
Great, thank you, Tim. Okay, another question. In QlikView exit script, line inside if, then, end if statement behaves very strange and generates global error, closing the file right over the reload. How about Qlik Sense? Is this the same issue?
Okay, so yeah, quite a sort of techie question there. Yes, so if you write the exit script with inside an if-then or a loop, for example, then it can cause some problems. And that's certainly where I'd advocate the use of the debug mode rather than having to use the exit script command. So if you're inside a loop or you've got some if-then statements, don't use the exit script mode. Use the debugger to sort of step through any problems that you may be experiencing there, and you sort of save any of the errors that could potentially cause. Qlik Sense doesn't error in the same way as Qlik View, but the data model that you'll end up with it would be slightly inconsistent. So yeah, absolutely, make sure you use the exit script at the end of sections, load statements, or at the end of the loops.
Great, thank you. Another question that's come in, is set analysis the basis for forcing a view, for example, to force overdue view?
So set analysis can be used for a vast array of different things. The quick example that I actually just showed you was a really simple way of being able to sort of limit a selection. But yeah, you certainly can use set analysis to sort of stop charts flexing when other selections are made, or always force a selection and have no bearing on what you've selected. So you can almost use it as a way to sort of decouple the items interacting with each other.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. Any more questions that come in, we'll get back to you on a one-to-one basis. So what I'd like to do is thank everyone for attending the webinar today, and thank you to Tim for a great presentation and lots of tips and tricks that we can go away with. So I wish you all a very good day. Thanks very much.